Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with New York City jazz pianist Isaiah J. Thompson. We had a good talk about his new 2023 CD, The Power of the Spirit. He is a rising star in the modern world of jazz, making waves in the scene with a deep respect for the jazz tradition and forward-thinking approaches to improvisation. He has established himself well as one of the most exciting young cats of his generation. We get into quite a bit in this interview. Enjoy.
Hey, it's great to meet you. Thanks for taking a minute out for the program.
Of course, yeah. Thanks for having me.
So, yeah, it's my pleasure. I love The Power of the Spirit. Before we get into this project, we just went through quite a thing with COVID over the last 3 years. And I'm curious, as a professional musician, how you survived that time period and how it's changed the way that you kind of do your music and your business now.
Sure, that's a good question. I mean, I think the first thing, because, actually, in a weird way, I was actually dealing with a bit of an injury during that time too. So, in both ways, I think it really challenged how I thought about playing. And I think before I really took it for granted, like being able to play is such a gift, itself. Just being able to sit down at the instrument and actually just get a sound and play. I think I've definitely overlooked in the past, and I probably will continue to do so. But now at least I have an understanding, and I try to challenge myself every time I sit at the instrument and say, it's just a blessing that you're able to play today.
So not only did you have an injury you were healing from, but it was compounded by the fact that there was this global absence of musicians being able to do anything live.
Right. Exactly right.
Yeah. That's heavy. I would imagine now with you and with other musicians, without being presumptuous here, is that this has to be quite triumphant to be able to have an album coming out now that the world's waking up.
Sure. I mean, I'm grateful, honestly. I've been working on some of the music for, 5 years or even more. So for it to finally be, to be able to present it, I'm thankful.
So talk to me a little bit about this particular album, The Power of the Spirit. Talk to me about how you arrived at this sound, how everything came together for you on this project.
Yeah, so a lot of these songs I started writing when I first started at school. Over time I just developed more and more of them, but I've been fixing them for so long also. There's some things on IT department I remember writing in 2015 and then only last year changing, so, or 2 years ago changing. So, they very much have they have a life to them and they're very much in progress. And I only, finished them because they had to be done to be put on recording. But I'm somebody that, I will change and try to mature and try to fix until it needs to be played. But all the songs that I write or that I compose, I try to make them be about something. And, it can be difficult because you don't always want to have an idea and then try to make music after you have the idea, because sometimes it could feel forced. But sometimes you don't want to do the opposite either, because that might not be genuine to make the music and then try to make it be about something later. So you have to find that kind of balance. And I'm pretty happy with how it came out.
So what do you ultimately hope the listener gets from this album?
Sure. Yeah, I just hope that they get a insight into who I am. I always say I try to be the same person on stage that I am off. So I thought it was important to hear a live recording. I think one of the biggest reasons I chose to do that was because I don't think, especially a lot of people in my generation, I don't think that they've heard what I would consider real jazz. And also, even more so, haven't been to a place where they heard jazz. So for someone to be like, oh, this is what it sounds like if I were to go hear them or to go to a jazz club. One of my favorite compliments, it's kind of a bit of a backhanded compliment, but it's also good. And people say, man, I really don't like jazz, but I love what you play. So I think in that way, I think a lot of people are saying, I don't think that they've actually heard the real thing, because I don't think that they would say they don't like it, And so I think that was definitely one of my biggest goals in releasing this live recording.
I was thinking the other day, I went to the stadium here in Kansas City. They had the day before opening day, a practice thing, and I have a Neon Jazz button on my code. And someone said, what is that? And I said, I have a radio show. It's jazz. And everybody, when I tell them that, they're always like, yeah, I love jazz. I'm like, cool, you know? And I'm like,
right,
you know, getting into it. And then they're like, yeah, I really listen. All I listen to is smooth jazz. And I don't want to put smooth jazz into any, I'm not trying to downgrade it, but I'm like, I get into the jazz, like with what you're saying. If you haven't heard it right, like I am getting into the Cats, you know, and that's not putting down smooth jazz, so to speak, but that's not what I do. But I get that all the time, you know, because my brain's going from, oh yeah, they're a jazz fan, and then it's like, well, it's just smooth jazz I like. But anyway, it's interesting because I think that compliment you guys, and I hear musicians say a lot, is a pretty huge thing because there's a good chance that you're going to be the conduit to them converting over to something in their lives because they hear the real deal.
I hope so.
Yeah. So let's get into your history and how you arrived where you're at. Talk to me a little bit about growing up and how jazz became your passion, became who you are today.
Yeah, sure. My parents, you know, they put me in a lot of different programs as a kid. I'm from West Orange, New Jersey. You know, I started dropping them off one at a time, whatever, you know, the swimming or the fencing that I did or different oratorical competitions, things like that. And then my parents had put me in a classical school in the beginning. I wouldn't say that I'm particularly classically trained. I wouldn't say that I got far enough to say that, especially now that I actually know classical piano. But you know, I started dropping those things one at a time, and then eventually I got around to piano. I was like, I don't think I want to do this anymore. And my dad was like, you can't quit everything, you know. So I was lucky enough that Nat Adderley Jr. lived across the street. He was playing a lot for Luther Vandross, and I grew up with a lot of R&B and gospel music in the house. And I was like, oh yeah, and I kind of naturally learned the history. Oh, Nat Adderley Jr., Nat Adderley Sr., Cannonball. I was just aware. I never really had formal lessons, but I was aware that this person lived in my neighborhood. I think, you know, through that and through playing piano, I just started to discover different programs. I was really lucky that kind of in my area, my county, we just have so many jazz musicians wherever you look. Christian McBride, Kenny Garrett, Bill Charlap. I mean, it's just countless musicians. And so a lot of programs came out of that. I was involved in NJPAC Jazz for Teens, Jazz House Kids, in Newark and in Montclair, New Jersey, and I found a lot of other students and kids my age that were playing at extremely high level at such a young age. It was so ridiculous. And so when I found these things, I had a very short amount of time to figure out a lot of information. So I you know, became more involved with them, and I think when I was around 13 or 14, I was like, you know, I think I really want to do this for the rest of my life, you know, and I made that decision. And I've been fortunate enough to be around and have a lot of mentors and people who looked out for me, and also, like I said, a lot of other musicians around my age that inspired me to continue on this path.
What was the first live jazz show that floored you, that made you either think you want to be on that stage or it just ignited a fire?
Oh, that's a good question. Do I even remember? Oh, man. I think it was most likely Nat Adderley Jr. was playing trio. I can't remember where it was. There used to be this club in Montclair called Trumpets, and I think it might have been there. And I feel like I heard something. I'm like, oh, this is different than anything else I've ever heard. And then on recording, I think, you know, for a lot of pianists, it's usually Oscar Peterson. It's kind of he's very easy conduit. It's very, you know, he's very easy to listen to and be like, wow, and it can entirely it changes your perspective on the music and can change your life. So yeah, that's what I would say.
So we go from that moment with Nat to the fact that you've been around what people would consider, you know, heavyweights that they would be fortunate to see live, like Wynton Marsalis and Christian McBride and John Pizzarelli, Buster Williams, lots of names. What have you learned from the legends and luminaries of the jazz craft that you've held on to or you incubate in your life?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really great question. I think that, you know, they're all different people, you know, and you can learn something different from all of them. I think sometimes we group them all together as, jazz masters, which is great, but I think I've been really fortunate to be able to be up and close with them and see them for who they are, and it's like, okay, this is a person, and you kind of got to take them off your pedestal a little bit just to be able to communicate with them, but also you want to leave it there to be respectful, so you have to find that balance. And I think they've all they've just all shown me just a kind of humility towards the music. And I've, like you said, you mentioned Wynton Marsalis. He's been in my ear since I was 15 or so. And, I don't know how he finds the time to spend with so many people, because I can remember very specific, times where we spent a lot of time together. He was taking the time to really show me something, take the time to pick up the phone, whatever it was. And you could talk to 1,000 other kids and they could tell you the same story. So I don't know, they find the time to do that, but I think one thing I can say about all of them is that they're super invested, and they showed me how serious you have to be about this. And that's not something that's, common in the media, to show you how serious jazz is. Actually, generally the media market's the opposite to you. So to see it up and close, like I was saying, how serious you have to take the music, I think that for sure changed my life.
It's interesting. I've found that more and more, that the more I see, especially big live acts come through Kansas City, it's like you just don't get the power of it until you see it live. For instance, Miguel Ganon came to town, and I saw him with his group, and those guys blew me away. Like the way that they interacted together, because jazz obviously it's a language, it's a conversation to a good degree, but the power of it, like you do feel it on a recording, but live when your shirt moves to the sound of what's happening and you literally feel it, it's a different thing. So I can only imagine if you do get next to these hallowed names that we all hear about and you see that happen in person, it has to be transformative.
Yeah, completely, for sure.
So as somebody that grew up in Jersey that was close to New York, and obviously, I mean, that's the cauldron of jazz worldwide. And you were at Dizzy's Coca-Cola in mid-March. What was the first stage in New York that you got to play on where you kind of was like, wow, like your human side came out, you said, I can't believe this is happening?
That's a good question. I've definitely had such a relationship with Dizzy's. I think one of the first club I played in New York was probably Dizzy's. I was, as a part of the Jazz House Kids, they generally have a concert. I'm not sure if it's every year, but we went and we performed there. I remember all of us were super nervous. I don't even know how young we were at that point. We might have been in middle school. I think that was probably the first one. I think my first, I would say maybe official gig as a band leader happened when I moved for school, when I moved to New York, and I think it might have been maybe the late night at Dizzy's, but eventually I got some residencies, which were very helpful. I'm super thankful. I was down at Mesro, I believe around twice a month, and I was at Smoke almost every week. So those two places I can remember very distinctly, just giving me the space to figure out how to mature and figure out what I wanted to sound like, what I wanted to do. Those were very helpful for my trajectory.
So in this life of being a musician, there's so many facets to go into it, from recording and playing live and everything in between. What is it that you like the best about being a professional musician?
One of the greatest things is that you get to carry your culture with you at all times. I think, and it's not something that someone can take away from you. You enter a room and you can change the outlook of someone's day. You can change the outlook of someone's life. You can bring experience to someone or make someone consider something they'd never considered before. And that all deals with the amount of grace that you show up with when you play. How much can you? And it's not a manipulation thing. It's just, I show up and I can just play as best as I can play and try to represent Isaiah, as best I can. And I hope that has an impact for the better on whoever is in the audience. And I'm super thankful for that. Not everybody has that opportunity, and we get to do this most days as it being our job, I definitely don't take that for granted.
You know, the one thing about coming back from this pandemic, you know, the world's just, you know, really, really roaring and opening up. And I'm curious, how strong do you see jazz being now in 2023? You know, there was a lot of dings, a lot of clubs closed, a lot of musicians had to find other jobs and move, but it seems like things have gotten back and they're gathering a lot of strength. What's your perception of the strength of jazz in America in 2023?
I don't know. That's a good question. I really don't know. You know, I remember interviewing Toshiko Akiyoshi, and she was saying, I mean, she was actually alive during that time. She got to see people like Miles and Duke Ellington, I think she even mentioned. And she was saying, you know, we see him in the history books and things, but she remembers being there, and it wasn't always that the audience was super filled up. She remembers going to see Miles. I think she was saying she was in Boston at some point, and there wasn't a lot of people there, you know. So sometimes we have this perspective of what it was like, and she was saying it's not always what we think it was, and that jazz specifically is not always, you know, there's obviously a time when, you know, it was the most popular music, but she says she felt that jazz always had more of a passionate audience than it did always in numbers. And I think that's very true. I think there's a lot of listeners to jazz. Every time I find them, they're extremely passionate, you know, about it. And I'm not sure that, you know, other genres have the same situation as we do. I do think that there's, you know, now we're in the time of social media. I think there's definitely going to be some changes in how people deal with music. You know, one of the things I was afraid of is that, you know, doing a live recording, those songs are naturally longer. And we're in a time where people generally listen to shorter clips or shorter, you know, so do we have the attention span to be able to listen to a live recording? I didn't know, but I didn't constrain myself to those guidelines because I was more about the music. So like I was saying, I think it's very passionate music, and you just got to do what you have to do regardless of the time period you're existing in, if that makes sense.
It totally makes sense. Yeah, and I agree. I think there's a level of passion that goes into the jazz audience. It's just a little bit different. You know, I always loved the Miles story where late in his career he used to come up on stage and blow one note and leave. And I don't know whether, you know, I don't know how rooted in truth that is. I would love to see the YouTube clip of it, and I've never been able to locate it, you know, because it would be quite short. It would be about a second long, and that's it. But, you know, let's get into something kind of in a fantastical way here, since we've talked about these rooms and musicians. Let's say we get off the phone, Jazz DeLorean pulls up in front of your house, and you can go and see any musician in the history of jazz anywhere. What digits are you punching in? Where are you going?
Wow. Any musician. Wow, that's a great question. You know, I would give you a different answer on any day. You know, I think as you know, we're approaching April. I'm thinking about I share a birthday with the great Duke Ellington, April 29th. I would have to say, at least today, I would say Duke Ellington. Duke Ellington is such a foundation to the music. We would not have what we have without Duke Ellington. And also, you know, I mean, he just held himself with such a sophistication to see that and what that represented even outside the music. Then when you add the music on top of that and how complicated and intellectual and beautiful his writing was, I mean, and playing was, it's unbelievable. I mean, to be able to see that up close, that would be a dream.
The one thing I try to do on my show is to make sure that we revere where we came from in jazz, the old school, but it's also very, very important for us to understand the innovation and evolution that's happening with modern jazz and the cats that are putting it out now. So the flip side of that question is this. Who in the world of modern jazz would you love to see live that you haven't yet?
I don't know. You know, I've been actually really lucky, you know, just being able to be on like things like the Jazz Cruise and being around. I feel like I've been able to see most people, you know, that at least are around now. We try to make it a point to see as many people as possible. You know, that and this is not necessarily answering your question, but I feel like when I think about people like Duke, how he was influenced by people like John Coltrane and McCoy Tyner later in his life. I think about people that are still around, that maybe not even playing. I wish I could have seen Wayne Shorter more. There's some people like that that are still around. But I think as far as people that are, kind of in the middle of their careers and around, I don't know. That's a really good question. I can't give you a straight answer, unfortunately.
Well, let's give you a question you probably can't answer. Why do you love jazz?
Why do I love jazz? Jazz is, I was actually looking at somewhat of a definition the other day. It's I think one of the important aspects of the definition is that it is an elaboration on the blues language and tradition. And I think that's one part that's forgotten about the music. It's such a form of the blues. It's so connected to it. And I think it allows me to relate to it. It allows me to be super individualized in the journey that is the blues. It's having that understanding that you're going to face adversity, but it's going to be okay. And I think, that's the blues. And then for jazz to be an elaboration on that, and how is it going to be okay through this way and through this way and like this and like this, it allows me to have such a connection to my history and also a connection to the future, while also trying to be present. I think it's very encapsulating of the time we lived in, we're living in, and are going to live in, because that's a very timeless thing, jazz and what it stands for, and the blues and what that stands for.
So everyone out there has a perception of you, your family, your friends, your fans, but ultimately you live your life. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
That's a really good question. I've actually been thinking about that a lot recently, because playing the instrument is what I do. It's not who I am. I think, jazz has definitely changed my life, and it has definitely challenged who I am as a person. It's changed me for the better. Me, though, I'm someone that I try to be the best version of myself every day, and I have to, I try to, what can I say? Try to be, a good person. I try to encourage others. That's been a big one recently, because you never know what somebody else is going through. And trying to encourage people and always be on your best behavior, be respectful. I think that has it really challenges me every day, because there's some days you don't want to do that. It's not an easy thing to do, but that's who I try to be, and that's who I want to be. So I hope that comes through in the music.
Isaiah, thank you for opening up, man. Thanks for talking about your life and music, the power of the spirit. Best of luck with everything. And before we get out of this digital door here, where's the best place to pick up the album and find out about, any live shows you have, anything in your world?
Sure, yeah. You can just go over to IsaiahJThompson.com, and it'll point you in the right direction.
Right on. Isaiah, thanks again, man. Best of luck with everything.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest cats in New York City, New Jersey, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. Thanks to Isaiah for his time, energy, and cool. If you want to hear more interviews, you can find Neon Jazz interviews on either Spotify or Apple Podcasts. You can subscribe to us at YouTube, and for everything Neon Jazz, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.